12 years of marriage ended with one text and a zeroed-out bank account. No warning. No apology. Just a smug message and silence. But while he boarded a plane with his 22-year-old girlfriend convinced he'd left me behind, I was already 10 steps ahead. I had my own bank account, a lawyer ready to strike, and a folder full of receipts detailing every lie he thought I'd never find. Stay with me. Because this isn't just about revenge, it's about what happens when a woman stops doubting herself and starts documenting everything. The ribbon was lavender silk, delicate, precise, just like Mrs. Linton preferred. Teresa looped it gently around the box and tucked in a sprig of dried lavender, her signature touch. The boutique was quiet, bathed in warm golden light from the window. Outside, fall leaves scuttled along the sidewalk. She heard the little chime of her phone, glanced down and saw it. I'm leaving you for Ashley. She's 22. I already drained the account. Enjoy your little store. For a moment, everything stilled. The ribbon stayed in her hands, soft and unbroken. Her eyes scanned the message again, not because she didn't understand it, but because she expected to feel something more than this strange, hollow clarity. Mrs. Linton admired the packaging with a delighted hum. You always do the most beautiful wrapping, Teresa. I swear it's half the reason I come back. Teresa smiled gently. Happy to hear it. Lavender suits you. She rang up the order, wrapped the scarf with care, and walked Mrs. Linton to the door. They exchanged pleasantries. The bell chimed as it closed behind her. Only then did Teresa walk slowly back to the register, pick up her phone again, and reread the message. She didn't cry. Her hands didn't shake. Her lips didn't even press together with restrained emotion. The only thing that gave her away barely was a subtle tightening around her eyes. This wasn't a surprise. Not really. She'd seen it coming. Not in the way people claim they just knew, but ignore the red flags anyway. Number. Teresa had seen it clearly, and she had prepared for it quietly, methodically, like a woman who'd learned that emotional pain was never the worst kind. Financial ruin, betrayal masked as romance, being caught off guard. Those were the deeper wounds. 6 months ago, the first late night at the office hadn't matched Mark's deposit stub. A month later, he changed his phone password. When he started doing sit-ups in the living room every morning before work, shirtless, panting, desperate, she hadn't said a word. Not when he started wearing cologne again, or when he began ordering designer button-ups online with brand names he used to mock. She had noticed. All of it. And so she had acted. Teresa remembered exactly when she had opened a separate bank account. It had been a chilly Tuesday in March. She'd worn her favorite navy blazer to feel composed even as she sat in that sterile bank office and signed the forms. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't even let herself cry afterward. Instead, she went home, brewed a cup of mint tea, and sorted receipts. Over the next few weeks, she diverted funds, small believable amounts, into the new account. She took careful screenshots, kept printed statements, marked dates on a color-coded spreadsheet. Every charge that didn't make sense, every hotel booking, every restaurant receipt dated for nights he said he was working late. She wasn't preparing for revenge. She was preparing for survival. Mark's message didn't hurt because she hadn't already grieved the marriage. She had, quietly. Months ago. The first time she realized he wasn't just distracted but elsewhere, emotionally gone, something inside her had started detaching. Not out of malice but protection. I'm leaving you for Ashley. She's 22. Of course she was. Teresa remembered Ashley from the office party, giggles, too loud eyeliner, too thick hands that lingered too long on Mark's arm. At the time, Teresa had watched silently, her wine glass balanced perfectly in her hand. She's just young, she told herself that night. She doesn't know he's a man who gets bored when things get real. She hadn't known then what would happen, but she had known enough. The line about the drained account was almost comical. As if he'd just performed some masterstroke. As if she hadn't left just enough money in there to make it look normal, routine, paycheck, deposits, auto bill payments, even a small vacation fund for show. What Mark had taken was a decoy. A sandcastle. The real fortress stood elsewhere. Quiet. Protected, waiting. Teresa set her phone down, walked to the front of the store, and flipped the sign to closed. Her hands moved gracefully, almost ceremonially. She locked the door, drew the curtains, and exhaled. No rage, no chaos, no broken glass or shouting matches. Just a woman at the end of a long road who had packed for the journey ahead. Upstairs in the small office she'd carved out above the shop floor, Teresa opened a drawer. Inside were 3 neatly labeled folders: 1. Business, boutique legal; 2. Personal, financial discrepancies; 3. Divorce preparation. She pulled out the third. It was time. Her lawyer, Evelyn Chambers, had told her this day might come sooner than later. If he ever makes a move, Evelyn had said during their first meeting, call me. Immediately. I'll handle the rest. Teresa took a breath and dialed. When Evelyn answered, her tone was calm but alert. Has he? Teresa looked out the window. The sky was soft, cloudless. Her boutique's name shimmered in gold lettering on the glass, the woven line. Yes, she said. He's made his move. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Then it's our turn. Downstairs, the boutique was silent. The shelves held curated collections of scarves, handbags, and curated European fragrances. The store wasn't big, but it was hers. Every inch of it had been built with care, funded by Teresa's long hours, quiet resilience, and the unshakable belief that her dreams weren't small, no matter how often Mark had referred to it as her little store. And now that little store was the reason she hadn't collapsed. It was the reason she'd had the resources to prepare, to survive, to fight back, not with fists, but with foresight. You're not stupid, she told herself softly. You were just waiting. 6 months earlier, the first sign was small. Almost laughably small. A single hotel receipt tucked into Mark's coat pocket. She had found it while helping him look for his keys, which, ironically, were sitting in plain sight on the hallway table. She unfolded the receipt and read the name of the hotel. The date, a Tuesday. He had told her he was working late that night, something about end-of-quarter reports and a system migration. She remembered staying up late herself, cross-referencing vendor shipments for the spring collection. She hadn't confronted him. Not then. Instead, she tucked the receipt into a drawer in her office. She didn't even ask herself why. She already knew. The next sign came quietly, too. He changed his phone password. After years of sharing everything from bank logins to Netflix accounts, suddenly he was shielding his screen like a teenager texting a crush in study hall. Then came the cologne. The gym sessions. The protein shakes in the fridge labeled with his name as if she might be tempted to steal one. The scent of someone else's perfume began clinging to his shirts. Not hers. Sweet and juvenile, like artificial strawberries and too much hope. He said she was being paranoid. She said nothing. Teresa had never seen silence as a weapon before. She'd always believed in clarity and honesty, in voicing what mattered. But there was something about this betrayal, this quiet erasure of their life together, that demanded a different kind of response. If Mark was going to lie, then she would make sure she was the one holding the truth. It was mid-March when she scheduled a meeting with First Western Credit Union. She told Mark she was going to a local vendor showcase. Instead, she sat across from a young banker named Lydia and said, simply, I need to open a personal checking account, and I need it to be completely separate from any shared records. She didn't tremble when she handed over her ID. Her voice was calm, her eyes steady. But later that night, when she sat in the quiet of her home office, the reality of what she had done sank in. She had just laid the foundation for leaving or surviving being left. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself and stared at the bank welcome packet. You're not leaving yet, she told herself. But if he does, you'll be ready. Mark came home late that night. The usual excuse systems crashed, meetings ran long. You wouldn't believe how incompetent the new hire is. He never noticed that she didn't ask follow-up questions anymore. She just smiled, nodded, and slid a bowl of pasta in front of him. I'm trying to stay low carb, he grumbled, barely touching it. Next time, she said. Each week, Teresa moved small amounts of money from her boutique's revenue stream into her new account. Nothing that would raise suspicion. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Her boutique, the woven line, was her lifeline, her dream. She had built it from a folding table at a weekend market, working Saturdays, while Mark complained about her being distracted and too busy. When she'd first rented the shop, he'd laughed. A boutique. That's cute, he had said, the way someone might pat a child on the head for selling lemonade. She had painted the walls herself, refinished the shelves, curated every item by hand. And when she opened the doors, the first customer was a woman named Sheila who bought a scarf and said, "You have good taste. This feels like a little Paris in Ohio." It was the first time in years Teresa felt seen. There had been moments when she almost gave it up, on nights when no one walked in, when Mark sneered at her accounting spreadsheets and said, "You spend more time in that place than you do with me." As if his interest in her had ever extended past convenience. She kept going anyway. Not for revenge, not for pride, but because the woven line was hers. She had built something no one could take. Her notebook began to fill with screenshots, receipts, calendar, discrepancies, blurry Instagram stories of office drinks that Mark never mentioned. She documented everything. Each night, after locking up the shop, she'd sit with a glass of wine and update her files. It became a ritual. Track, archive, survive. One evening, she stood in her closet staring at a silk dress she hadn't worn in over a year. The last time she put it on was for their anniversary dinner. Mark had stared at his phone most of the night. She remembered thinking, if I left right now, would he even notice? She didn't leave that night, but she began preparing for the possibility. When Mark started talking about streamlining their finances and combining everything for simplicity, she agreed, bright-eyed, supportive, even enthusiastic. "I trust you," she had said, pressing a kiss to his cheek. He smiled, oblivious, while she moved what remained of her personal savings into the account he didn't know existed. It was in April when she first met with Evelyn Chambers, a lawyer recommended by her friend Greta, who had gone through a quiet, brutal divorce the year before. Teresa arrived at Evelyn's office carrying a canvas tote filled with color-coded folders. "I'm not leaving him," she said, laying the folders on the table. "Not yet. But I want to understand what I need to protect." Evelyn had nodded. Not a flicker of judgment. Just calm, efficient understanding. "Most women come in too late," she said. "You're not one of them." Teresa had left the meeting with a checklist, a sense of direction, and a strange, unexpected peace. The silence wasn't cowardice. It was clarity. She had stopped hoping he would come home earlier or notice her new earrings or ask about her day. Instead, she noticed everything else: the lie behind his smile, the way he no longer looked her in the eye, the way he had already exited the marriage, even if his body still lived in their house. Now, 6 months later, that body had finally made its move. And she was ready. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Mark. Something smug and juvenile, probably. She didn't look. Instead, she picked up her phone and called Evelyn. When the line picked up, Teresa didn't hesitate. "He just made his move," she said softly. Evelyn's voice came through the line, calm and certain. "Then it's our turn." The messages didn't stop. They came at odd hours, early mornings, late nights, and always with a biting edge. Mark had moved on physically, but digitally he lingered like a ghost, tapping at the edges of her world. "Ashley makes me feel alive again. You never understood me. You're going to regret being this cold. I gave you the best years of my life. My family knows everything. They agree this was bound to happen. We grew apart. Don't pretend that shop means anything. You clung to it because you didn't know how to love me." Teresa read each one in silence. Her expression didn't shift. Her breath stayed even. She simply took screenshots and dragged them into her folder titled Emotional Evidence. Each message was a confession. Each insult another brick in the wall of her case. She didn't block him. Not yet. Not because she needed to hear his words, but because every word confirmed who he truly was, and who she was becoming in response. That night, after she closed the boutique, she stood in the doorway of her home for a long moment before stepping in. The porch light bathed her in amber, casting soft shadows on the wooden floorboards, boards Mark once said were too creaky to impress anyone. She didn't flip on the lights right away. The darkness was comforting, like a pause between heartbeats. Upstairs, she changed into a cotton robe and padded barefoot into the living room. The space was neat, curated. Not showroom, perfect lived in. It smelled of sandalwood and tea. On the side table, a ceramic mug waited with chamomile cooling inside. Her hand reached toward a leather-bound album on the bottom shelf. The wedding album. She hadn't opened it in years. The first photo was of her and Mark standing under a white trellis laced with ivy. Her smile stretched wide, untouched by disappointment. Mark's eyes held something like charm before charm hardened into self-absorption. Teresa turned each page slowly. There was the reception toast where he bragged about being the lucky one. The shot of their first dance where her head rested on his chest, like she had finally arrived home. Another page. Another version of herself, one who thought love was bulletproof. She didn't cry. She felt distant, like she was reading a novel about someone she used to be. Someone kind, hopeful, unprotected, not stupid. Just trusting. That woman hadn't died. She had evolved. Forgiveness, Teresa realized, wasn't about saying it was okay. It wasn't about fixing what was broken or inviting him back into the light. It was about reclaiming peace, letting go of the weight. Forgiveness isn't about going back, she whispered into the stillness. It's about moving forward without carrying the resentment. She closed the album and placed it back on the shelf. Gently, as if she were laying an old friend to rest. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't need to check to know who it was. Still, she did. "I'll let you stay in the house if you're respectful during the divorce." She burst out laughing. Real sharp, involuntary laughter. It bounced off the walls, startling even her. He would let her stay. This house had been hers long before Mark ever stepped through the front door. Left to her by her grandmother, who told her once, "Always keep something that's yours alone. It will save you one day." He had never contributed to the mortgage, never helped with repairs. He'd criticized the wallpaper, hated the porch swing, and wanted to knock down the kitchen wall. But he had never owned a single square foot of it. She opened her notes app and added a line under legal highlights: attempted verbal manipulation, implying control over separate property house. She scrolled up to the previous note and tapped attach screenshot. Done. Teresa walked down the hallway into her office. This room had become her war room. Papers lined the desk, organized in labeled trays: asset documentation, separate business accounts, joint liabilities, and communication records. In the center, her laptop was open, cursor blinking on a spreadsheet titled Financial Timeline, Fraudulent Charges. She clicked Insert New Row and filled in the details: date today. Charged 2 first-class tickets, Miami. Hotel booking, the Royal Palms Ocean View Suite. Card used joint credit, last 4 digits 9,338. Status confirmed via text. Next. Action, contact credit card company. She picked up the phone. American Liberty Bank, this is Denise. How may I assist you today? Hi Denise. My name is Teresa Green. I need to report fraudulent charges made on a joint credit card. I can help with that. What were the charges? Flights and a hotel reservation booked today to Miami. I did not authorize them. In fact, I have written proof that my husband used our joint card to book a trip with his girlfriend after clearing out our account. A pause. Then Denise's voice softened. That's a lot. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Do you have the proof handy? Text messages, Teresa replied. I'll forward them immediately. Thank you. I'll remove him as an authorized user and start the fraud investigation. We'll also cancel that card today. Appreciated. One more thing, Miss Green. Denise added, her tone respectful. Good for you. Teresa smiled. Thank you. Really? Mark's vision of escape was already unraveling. By morning, the airline would deny their check-in. The hotel reservation would vanish. Ashley would probably pout confused. And Mark, he'd rage. He'd blame. He'd spiral. But Teresa wouldn't see it. She didn't need to. Instead, she poured herself another cup of tea and walked out to the back porch. The moon was low, haloed in cloudlight. The garden she'd planted last spring was quiet, sleeping, preparing to bloom again. Like her. She watched the wind nudge, the wind chimes, listened to their gentle clink, and let her breath sink with the night. Her phone vibrated once more. What did you do? The tickets are canceled, the hotel too. Are you serious right now? She didn't even open the full message, just captured it, labeled it, saved it. There was nothing more to say. Mark had underestimated the strength in her silence. He'd expected a tantrum, a breakdown, a plea. But Teresa wasn't the woman he married anymore. She wasn't begging to be loved. She was already standing in her own light. The courthouse smelled of lemon polish and nerves. Teresa arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in charcoal gray slacks and a cream silk blouse, understated, timeless, professional. Her hair was pulled into a low chignon. No flashy jewelry. No dramatic makeup. She wasn't here for theatrics. She was here for clarity. She sat calmly outside courtroom, 2B hands folded over a leather portfolio. Her lawyer Evelyn stood beside her, flipping through notes with the same quiet authority Teresa had come to rely on. Then came the click of designer boots. She didn't even need to look up to know it was Mark. He walked in with the swagger of a man who believed charm still worked. His outfit looked like it had been stolen from a college sophomore's Instagram-tight jeans that clung too closely to thighs that had seen better days. A deep V-neck shirt under a too sleek blazer, sunglasses hanging from the collar. Like an afterthought, Ashley trailed behind him, her heels too high for the marble floor. She clutched her phone and whispered something in his ear, but Teresa couldn't hear it. She didn't need to. She could read the tension in the younger woman's shoulders. This wasn't going to be the Miami vacation she'd imagined. Mark glanced around as if expecting cameras. His eyes landed on Teresa. He smirked. She didn't blink. He walked toward her and leaned slightly too close. "You look composed," he said, surprised. "I am. Guess you're not as broken as I thought." A flash of disappointment. He'd wanted her to crack. Teresa simply smiled. "Guess not." Inside the courtroom, it was cool and sterile. The judge, a woman with a silver bun and an expression carved from granite, sat behind the bench with the calm of someone who had seen it all. Evelyn stood first. "Your Honor, we are requesting an emergency injunction to freeze all joint assets based on documented financial misconduct by Mr. Harrison. My client has compiled substantial evidence. Proceed," the judge said. Teresa opened her portfolio. Inside, copies of Mark's text messages bragging about emptying their account, screenshots of him mocking her, age, admissions of booking a trip with another woman on a joint credit card. There were spreadsheets outlining her boutique's separate finances, account numbers proving premarital ownership of the house, and business registration documents listing only her name. Evelyn laid it out piece by piece like a curator presenting an exhibit of quiet betrayal. Mark's lawyer, a man with too much gel in his hair and too little ground to stand on, cleared his throat. "My client admits he may have acted impulsively, but Mrs. Green's actions moving money to a separate account tracking his purchases seem calculated." "Calculated," Evelyn repeated. "Or prepared. My client protected her personal property and kept business finances separate. That's not manipulative, that's responsible." The judge nodded slowly. "Mr. Harrison, do you deny that you used joint funds to finance a trip with your girlfriend?" Mark shifted in his seat. I just needed a clean break." You didn't think," the judge finished for him. There was silence. Mark looked to Teresa finally, as if truly seeing her for the first time. His voice dropped. "You planned this. You were ready for this. Weren't you?" Teresa met his eyes and smiled. "I just paid attention." The judge adjusted her glasses. Based on the evidence presented, the court orders an immediate freeze of all shared financial accounts. Mr. Harrison is required to return the full sum withdrawn from the joint account within 48 hours. "But it's gone," Mark blurted. "We spent it. Flights, hotel." Then I suggest you find a way to return it," the judge said dryly. "This court does not take lightly the misuse of marital assets." Ashley let out a soft gasp from the back of the room. They took a brief recess. Outside, Teresa stood at the window overlooking the courtyard. The light hit the stone in just the right way. It looked like gold under pressure. Evelyn leaned in. "That went better than expected." Teresa nodded. "He thought he had me cornered. He thought you'd react emotionally." Teresa exhaled. "He thought wrong." Mark returned from the hallway noticeably quieter. His shirt clung to him now, not from style but sweat. He didn't sit as close to his lawyer as before. When the proceedings resumed, the court addressed property ownership. Mrs. Green, do you have documentation of sole ownership of the boutique and house? Teresa handed over certified copies. The house was inherited from my grandmother before marriage. The boutique was established prior to our wedding and has remained under my name legally and financially. The judge skimmed the pages, then looked to Mark. Do you have any proof of contribution? His lawyer stammered something about moral support and encouragement. The judge raised an eyebrow. Encouragement does not equal equity, especially when paired with documented emotional abuse and financial misconduct. Teresa felt her chest lift with a quiet relief she hadn't realized she was holding back. After court adjourned, Mark trailed behind her in the corridor. You turned everyone against me. No, Teresa said, pausing to face him. You did that yourself. You were watching me all along. Yes, she replied, voice even. Because I've learned something important. What? Teresa leaned in just enough so he could hear it clearly. A woman can be betrayed, but she should never be caught unprepared. Mark blinked. Ashley stepped back, clutching her handbag like it might protect her from the truth. For the first time, her lip trembled, not from nerves but disillusionment. Evelyn gently took Teresa's arm and led her away. As they exited into the sunlight, Teresa adjusted her collar, stood a little taller, and walked toward her car. The heels of her shoes echoed across the marble floor, not in retreat but in triumph. 3 weeks after the court order, Mark's life began to unravel thread by thread. The promotion he'd been waiting for, whispering about for months, boasting would prove everyone wrong, was quietly handed to someone else. A younger colleague. One who hadn't been caught dating a subordinate and funneling joint marital funds into personal vacations. HR never made a public statement. They didn't need to. The investigation had left enough of a shadow. Everyone noticed the way conversations paused when Mark walked into a room now. The way his emails started receiving slower replies. The way his supervisor started assigning him simpler tasks, less visibility, fewer decisions. He told Ashley it was political. That management couldn't handle a man who took charge of his happiness. Ashley didn't buy it. A week later, she was gone. No tearful goodbye. No second chances. Just a note left on the kitchen counter of her tiny studio apartment. I thought you were escaping something unfair. But you were just running from consequences. I can't carry them for you. Mark tried texting her. Then calling. Then showing up at her office. After the second time, she filed a formal complaint with security. He told his friends she had been immature, ungrateful. But the truth clung to him like a bad scent. With no one left to impress and no more pay raises coming, Mark made the inevitable move back into his childhood bedroom. He arrived at his parents' house with 2 duffel bags, a dying phone battery, and a story filled with half-truths. His mother tried to be gracious. Made him tea, washed his laundry. Told herself it was just temporary. But the whispers were already spreading. His sister Amanda heard from a friend at HR. Inappropriate behavior, questionable conduct, unprofessional texts. She didn't call right away. Not until she saw the screenshots. It was late afternoon when Teresa's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But the name on the screen, Amanda Harrison, gave her pause. She picked up steady. Hello, a beat of silence. Then Amanda spoke, quiet and deliberate. I wanted to apologize. Teresa blinked. For what? For not believing you, Amanda said. For thinking you were cold, controlling. That's what he told us, you know. That you micromanaged everything. That you cared more about your little shop than about him. Teresa said nothing. The silence made Amanda keep talking. But then I saw the messages, the receipts, the tone of everything he wrote. The way he mocked you for your age, your business. The way he gloated about draining your account. She sounded tired, almost ashamed. I used to think you were intimidating, Amanda admitted. Turns out you were just right. The next day her phone rang again. This time it was Mark's mother. Teresa let it go to voicemail. Then she listened to the message in full. Teresa, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. But I wanted you to know. I've spoken to Mark. And I told him he has no one to blame but himself. What he said about you, what he did, it's inexcusable. I'm sorry I ever believed his version. There was a pause, a shaky inhale. I raised him better than this, or I thought I did. Either way, I see the truth now. Teresa sat in the back garden with her phone resting on her knee. She didn't cry. She didn't feel vindicated exactly. She just felt light. Like a burden she didn't realize she was carrying had finally lifted. The truth had never needed defending. It had just needed time. Her boutique had become busier since the trial. Customers came in with quiet purpose, many of them women who offered soft, knowing smiles. One afternoon, a woman lingered by the silk scarves, then leaned in. My ex tried to take half my business too, she said. Said I owed him for all the support. She rolled her eyes. You'd be amazed how much people think they're entitled to just for breathing in the same room while you work. Teresa smiled. Not amazed at all. At night, she sometimes scrolled through her old notes from the months leading up to the divorce. Pages of screenshots, receipts, whispered warnings to herself. She didn't do it to relive the past. She did it to remind herself of what it took to hold the line. To stay silent when silence was smarter, to prepare instead of react. One evening while closing the register, Evelyn stopped by the boutique. You've built something bulletproof, she said, admiring a new display case. No one can take that from you. Teresa gave a small smile. They tried. And failed. Evelyn paused, then added, funny how truth works. It waits, but it always shows up. Eventually, Teresa nodded. The more you hold on to the truth, she said quietly, the more the world is forced to acknowledge it. Mark, meanwhile, was still telling stories. At the local bar, he spoke of his glory days in management. About the business ideas he had almost started. About the boutique that used to be half his. He told anyone who listened that he'd been blindsided. Betrayed. But fewer and fewer people listened. Word eventually got around that he'd joined an investment coaching group, one of those pyramid schemes disguised as masterminds. He talked about cryptocurrency, passive income rebuilding, but he never rebuilt. Because he never took responsibility. And the truth had already left him behind. Meanwhile, Teresa's second boutique location had opened with a quiet, elegant celebration. She didn't advertise it with banners or champagne towers. She just turned on the lights, unlocked the doors, and let the quality speak for itself. She stood in the middle of the new store that night, running her fingers over the polished display tables, and breathed in the scent of possibility. The past wasn't gone, it was honored. But it no longer defined her. Mark's mother called one last time. This time Teresa answered. I just wanted you to know, she said gently, we don't speak about it much anymore. He's still at home. Still saying it was all unfair. But we've stopped defending him. Teresa said nothing. Mark's mother continued, her voice quieter now. Thank you for showing us who he really was, even when we refused to see it. There was nothing left to say. And for once that felt like peace. The second location of the woven line opened on a quiet Thursday morning. No ribbon-cutting ceremony. No speeches. Just an open door, warm lighting, and the scent of fresh eucalyptus diffusers drifting through polished wood and linen displays. Teresa stood at the entrance with a set of keys in her hand, looking around the space she had designed down to the stitching on the furniture. She had chosen this neighborhood intentionally, quieter, residential, but growing. She had learned how to spot the shift before it happened. How to read trends, how to trust herself. And more than anything, she had learned how to build something that would not be easily shaken. The boutique was thriving in ways Teresa could barely have imagined 2 years ago. Customers lingered longer. They didn't just come to shop, they came to stay, to talk, to tell her things they hadn't told anyone else. I followed your story, one woman whispered while trying on a silk wrap. I was in the courtroom. Just in the back. You didn't see me, but I saw you. And I remember thinking, she's not broken. She's awake. Another woman dropped by just to say, you helped me leave. I didn't think I could. But after reading about your boutique, I opened a small flower stand. It's not much, but it's mine. And they said it with such reverence, mine. Soon journalists came knocking. First, it was a small piece in the local Makers Journal spotlighting female-owned businesses that had survived the pandemic and divorce. Then a full spread in Women and Business Weekly featuring Teresa on the cover in her signature navy blazer, standing in the center of her original shop, with folded arms and an unflinching gaze. The headline read, "She lost her husband. And then she built an empire." Teresa didn't care for the dramatics, but she understood their necessity. Stories needed contrast, and hers had plenty. The invitations followed. Keynote speeches at local business clubs, panels at women's entrepreneur summits, coffee chats with students who waited patiently to ask, "How did you know when to trust yourself?" She didn't have polished sound bites, she just told the truth. "I didn't always trust myself. I learned by watching how others used my silence as space to underestimate me. Then I realized preparation is louder than panic. You don't need to shout if you've already built the wall." One afternoon, while adjusting a new window display, her assistant manager Mari peeked in. "There's someone asking for you. She says she's not here to shop, but to talk." Teresa wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out into the showroom. A girl, 20-something, petite, messy braid, wide eyes, stood near the leather journals, clearly nervous. "Hi," she said. "My name's Eliza. I've followed your story since everything. I know this is weird, but I'm trying to open a shop too. Just a little one. And I don't know where to begin." Teresa smiled softly. "Sit with me," she said, gesturing to the cafe corner they'd added last spring. "Let's talk." Over oat milk lattes and a shared pastry, Eliza poured out her dreams. She wanted to open a handmade jewelry boutique. She'd been designing earrings from recycled metals, stringing necklaces with old piano wire, adding delicate glass beads she blew herself. Her eyes glowed when she talked about it but dimmed when she mentioned her boyfriend who called her venture a hobby or her parents who warned her to be realistic. "I'm scared," Eliza admitted. "What if I fail?" Teresa reached for her journal, tore out a blank page, and drew a single circle. "In here," she said, tapping the page, "is your fear. Around it," she added, "dots forming a wide halo, is everything you learn by moving through it." Eliza blinked. "No one ever told me fear had a purpose." "Fear means it matters," Teresa said. "And if it matters, it deserves structure, not surrender." They started meeting every other week. Not formally, not like coach and student, just two women. One further down the path, one just beginning. They talked about balance sheets and branding, but also about boundaries and belief. Eliza soaked it in. And each week she stood a little taller. The shop became more than a boutique. It became a beacon. Women came in after job interviews with trembling hands and eyes that begged for reassurance. They left with more than blouses. They left with stories, advice, and sometimes phone numbers of other customers who whispered, "Call me if you need help." It was community in its rawest form. Not curated, not branded, just real. On a rainy Sunday afternoon, Teresa sat near the register reviewing shipment invoices. Outside, puddles dotted the sidewalk. Inside, the windows glowed like warm invitations. She looked around and saw what she had built, not just a business, but a place of permission. Permission to rebuild, permission to hope again, permission to rise. A notification pinged on her phone. New message, Ashley. I just wanted to say, thank you. Teresa stared at the name for a moment. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Whatever Ashley had learned, she had learned it the hard way, and Teresa didn't need the apology. Not anymore. The story had moved beyond apology. It was now about impact. Later that evening, Eliza sent her a photo. A tiny storefront with a hand-painted sign, Threadlight Studio, jewelry with memory. Below it, her caption read, "Mine." Finally, Teresa stared at the photo for a long while. Not with envy. With awe. Because somehow along the way her own healing had become a map for someone else's beginning. It was late afternoon when the chime above the door rang. Teresa didn't look up right away. She was adjusting a new display of fall scarves, weaving burnt orange, navy, and gold tones into a rich cascade of texture. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood polish. It had been a quiet day, the kind that moved slow and steady. Then she heard the slight hesitation in footsteps. The almost exhale of someone deciding whether to stay. She turned. And there she was. Ashley. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun. No makeup, no heels. She wore a plain navy sweater and jeans, simple, too simple for someone who once seemed curated for aesthetic. She stood near the door like she wasn't sure if she'd be welcomed. Her eyes met Teresa's. Something passed between them, not recognition but reckoning. Ashley stepped forward slowly. "Hi," she said, her voice small. "I didn't come to shop." Teresa nodded once. "Okay, I came to say something I should have said a long time ago." For a moment, Teresa said nothing. She just gestured toward the two armchairs near the back beside the front-facing window where light always pooled gently in the afternoon. The same chairs where she had once sat with Eliza. Where hard conversations softened. Ashley followed, folding herself into the seat like someone who hadn't been held in a long time. She looked older than Teresa remembered. Not in years, but in weight. Emotional weight. "I believed him," Ashley said, eyes on her hands. "Everything he said about you, how cold you were, how controlling. How you didn't support his dreams. He made it sound like he was trapped in a loveless marriage with someone who didn't see him." Teresa stayed silent. "And I wanted to believe him," Ashley continued, "because it made me feel like I was saving him. Like I was the answer." She swallowed. "But I wasn't." There was a pause. "I became the next version of you," Ashley said. "Only, without your backbone." Her voice cracked. "He said I didn't understand him, that I was too emotional, too clingy. He didn't like how I laughed in public. Said I embarrassed him. I tried so hard to be who he wanted." She looked up, and for the first time Teresa saw her, not the girl who stood beside Mark at the courthouse. Not the younger, prettier replacement, just a woman. Wounded. Awake. "One night," Ashley said, "he told me I was lucky to have him. That no one else would ever be patient with someone like me." Teresa's jaw tightened, not with anger, just memory, how familiar those words had once been. "I started believing it," Ashley whispered. "That I was difficult, that I needed to be fixed." She paused. "Then I saw you. The article, the interview, the boutique, and I realized. You weren't cold, you were protecting yourself. You were brave." Her eyes glistened. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I took his side." Teresa leaned forward gently. "It's not your apology I needed," she said softly. "It's your healing." Ashley blinked. "I was never angry at you," Teresa continued. "I knew what version of me he fed you. I used to believe it too." Ashley's eyes widened. "It wasn't a dream he offered you," Teresa said. "It was an escape. There's a difference. Dreams ask us to build. Escapes ask us to disappear." Ashley's lip trembled. "You deserve something real," Teresa added. "Something that doesn't shrink you. Something that doesn't call your light too much." For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Then Ashley whispered, "You gave me a mirror. I hated what I saw at first, but it helped me leave. I moved out. I got a job at a nonprofit. It's small, but I wake up without dread." She exhaled. "And I talk to a therapist now. Every week." Teresa smiled. "That's something he never taught me to do," Ashley said with the faintest laugh. "Admit I needed help." The light through the window caught Ashley's eyes, wet but open. "You know," she said, "I used to think women like you were untouchable. Too put together. I thought I could never be like that." Teresa looked down at her hands. There were faint ink stains from receipts. A nick on her finger from unpacking new shelves. Wrinkles that hadn't been there 5 years ago. She looked up. "I'm not untouchable," she said. "I've just been touched by enough disappointment to know where my edges are." Ashley nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for letting me say this." Teresa's voice was steady. "Thank you for showing up." As Ashley stood to leave, she hesitated by the display near the door. She reached for a bracelet, thin, delicate, wrapped in recycled silk thread. She held it for a moment, then turned. "I'd like to buy this," she said. "Not because I need it, but because I want to support something that's real." Teresa nodded. Let me wrap it for you. As she tied the ribbon around the signature silver paper, Teresa thought about how strange and sacred life could be. How the woman who had once been her undoing was now sitting across from her seeking not redemption but reflection. And how healing wasn't linear. Sometimes it sat across from you with tear-filled eyes asking for nothing but honesty. Ashley walked out with her head higher than when she'd entered. Teresa watched her go, then turned back to her display, adjusting the scarf that had shifted ever so slightly. Outside, the sky had turned a deep rose gold. Inside, something had settled. Not revenge, not closure, but peace. The stage wasn't large, just a simple platform inside the glass atrium of a renovated library in downtown Portland. But to Teresa it felt vast. Not because of the crowd, though there were over 100 women seated in front of her. Not because of the spotlight warming her shoulders, but because of the stories seated in that room. Stories like hers, some still unraveling, some already rewritten. Above her, a banner read, "Women who build a day of voices, vision, and victory." Her boutique team had helped organize it. What started as a small networking circle had grown into a full-day workshop series for female entrepreneurs, creatives, and survivors of personal loss who wanted to reclaim something: time, energy, purpose. And now Teresa stood with a microphone in her hand and her heart open, not to impress, but to connect. "I'm not a speaker by trade," she began, smiling gently. "I'm a shop owner, a businesswoman, a woman who's spent most of her life learning when to stay silent and when not to." A soft laugh rippled through the crowd. "I'm not here to tell you how to bounce back. I'm here to tell you how to build forward." She walked across the stage slowly, each step measured, not rehearsed. "You know, when people hear my story, the first thing they often ask is, 'Weren't you furious? Didn't you want revenge?'" She paused. "Of course I did. I'm human." A few knowing chuckles. A few nods. But here's the thing. Anger is a spark. It burns hot and fast. And if you only build from rage, you build something that will collapse the moment you stop being angry. She looked out across the room. "I didn't want that. I wanted something that lasted." Behind her, the projector clicked softly. A photo appeared, her first boutique 5 years ago during renovation. Bare walls. Exposed brick, dust, and promise. "That's where it began," Teresa said. "A space that no one believed in but me. And later, a space that saved me." Click. A second photo, her current team. 15 women, arms around each other, smiling in sunlight. Some had been through divorce. Some were single mothers. Some were just starting their first jobs. All of them, Teresa said, taught me something about rebuilding. The room was quiet but not heavy. It was full of breath. Attention, heartbeats leaning forward. She shared pieces of her journey. Not the scandalous parts, those were public record by now. But the soft parts. The uncertain parts. The moment she moved her wedding album to a different shelf, not to forget but to reclaim space. The first time she mentored a younger woman without needing to prove anything. The day she walked into her bank alone, opened a line of credit, and said, "This is for my next chapter." When her talk ended, the room didn't erupt, it exhaled. A standing ovation followed, but Teresa didn't linger in it. She stepped off stage with humility, finding comfort not in applause but in the conversations that came next. Women approached her one by one, their voices hushed. "Your words, they made me feel brave. I'm still in it. But now I can imagine an after. I thought I was the only one who felt that kind of invisible." Later that afternoon, during the open Q&A, a college student stood up. Her hair was in a tight bun, her hands clenched around her notebook. She looked no older than 21. Her voice trembled. "Can I ask something personal?" "Of course," Teresa said, stepping slightly forward. The girl took a breath. "How did you not fall apart? I mean, you lost your husband, your savings, your reputation at first. How did you not break?" The room held its breath. Teresa did not rush. She looked straight at the young woman and said calmly, "I did fall apart." Murmurs of surprise swept lightly through the audience. "I cried on my closet floor. I forgot to eat. I doubted everything. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror." She stepped closer. But here's the truth, most people don't tell you can fall apart and still come back stronger. You can bleed and still rebuild. You can hurt deeply and still choose not to be defined by that pain. The girl wiped her eyes. Teresa smiled gently. I was broken. Then I chose to become a builder. Another woman raised her hand. Do you still feel angry? Teresa thought for a moment. I used to, she admitted. It sat in my chest like hot iron. But eventually I realized my peace was worth more than his apology. That line hung in the air, soft and powerful. I stopped needing to win against him, she added, because I'd already won with myself. The final question came from a woman in her 50s. Do you ever think about what you lost? Teresa looked out the window at the city skyline. I used to, she said. But not anymore. Because the truth is I didn't just lose a husband. I lost a version of myself who accepted less than she deserved. She turned back to the crowd, and in that loss, I found the woman I was meant to become. When the event ended, the crowd stayed. No one rushed out. Some lingered to talk to each other, some stood in quiet circles exchanging numbers, sharing dreams they hadn't dared to say aloud before. Teresa stood by the door shaking hands, listening. One woman hugged her and whispered, I came here hoping to feel less broken. I'm leaving with a blueprint. As she packed up her things, her assistant passed her a note from one of the volunteers. You reminded me today that success isn't revenge, it's proof of our real worth lived out loud. Teresa folded the paper and slipped it into her wallet. She looked up at the fading light pouring through the atrium roof and felt it settle into her chest like a steady flame. Not blazing, but warm, real. She didn't speak that day to prove anything. She spoke to pass the torch. Because when a woman builds her life from the ashes of betrayal, she does more than survive. She lights the path for others. And that not the pain, not the past, not even the boutique was her legacy. The fifth boutique was her boldest yet. Right in the heart of downtown, nestled between a reclaimed bookstore and an urban flower bar, the new woven line location stood with high windows, exposed beams, and a hand-painted mural that read, Strength is something we build. The grand opening was more than a celebration. It was a statement. 5 years ago, she had been left in silence, holding a phone with a cruel message and a drained bank account. Now she stood in the center of a room she had built from the ground up. No co-signers, no compromises, with hundreds of customers, supporters, and friends gathered to witness it. Teresa wore navy again. It had become her signature color, sharp, clean, self-defined. A quiet defiance of the woman she had once been told she had to be. As the speeches wrapped up and champagne flutes clinked gently beneath chandeliers made of hand-blown glass, she took a deep breath and stepped to the side, needing a moment alone. That was when she saw her. Standing near the floral arch at the entrance, almost hidden in the crowd, wearing one of her dresses, a linen midi with embroidered detailing, was Mark's mother, Helen. Her hair was grayer now, softer at the edges. But her posture, always formal, was ever so slightly humbled. She didn't approach the crowd, she stayed behind it. Yet her eyes were fixed on Teresa. Their gaze met. And for a moment the noise fell away. Helen stepped forward slowly. I wasn't going to come, she said softly. Didn't want to intrude. You're not. Teresa replied, her voice calm. Helen looked around the space, taking in the shelves, the framed artwork, the rows of ethically sourced fabrics. It's beautiful, she said. Like stepping into someone's strength. Teresa didn't respond right away. Helen looked down at the hem of her dress, smoothing the fabric with trembling fingers. I bought this from your second location. Told the clerk I liked the color, but really I think I just wanted to wear something that felt honest. She took a breath. Mark still lives with us, you know. Comes and goes. Always with some new excuse. Some new woman to blame. Some new story to explain why nothing is ever his fault. Teresa nodded quietly. I assumed as much. Helen hesitated. He's still bitter. Still tells people you turned everyone against him. That you stole everything. There was a silence between them, not heavy, not angry. Just full. Then Helen whispered. But I know the truth. I've known it for a while now. She looked Teresa in the eyes, voice trembling. You didn't destroy him, he destroyed himself. And you turned all that rubble into light. The words hung in the air. Teresa didn't need them. But somehow they still landed softly. She gave a small smile. Thank you. Helen touched her arm lightly. This place, all of this. It's not just a store, it's a monument to what a woman can become when no one claps for her. Later that night, after the last guests had gone, and the storefront was quiet again, Teresa walked alone through the space. She ran her hand across the polished shelves, turned off the lights one by one, checked that the cash drawers were secure. Then she stepped into her office. On the wall behind her desk, framed in simple black wood, hung a single photo. A screenshot. 5 years old. Have fun with your little shop. The message that had ended everything. The message that had begun everything. Beneath it, another frame. One added just this past month. Inside, the first national feature about the woven line headlined the boutique that refused to break. She stood between the two frames for a long moment, letting them both speak without needing to say a word. There was no resentment in her anymore. Only clarity. That message, the one meant to diminish her, had become a mirror she had used to reflect her own worth back to herself. It had once sounded like mockery. Now it sounded like motivation. As she gathered her bag to leave, her assistant manager peeked in. There's one more card you haven't opened, she said, handing it over. Teresa opened the envelope slowly. Inside, in careful handwriting, thank you for proving that light outlives cruelty. Eliza. Teresa smiled. Her first mentee. Now a successful shop owner herself, recently featured in a regional design magazine. She placed the card beside the frames on the wall, not pinned or taped, just leaned there gently. Because that was the real full circle. Success hadn't been a destination, it had been a reclamation. Of voice, of power, of peace. And her boutique. That was just the expression of it. What she had truly built was this. A life no one could threaten again, a name that no one could erase. A truth so solid even those who once doubted it had no choice but to acknowledge it. As Teresa turned off the final light and stepped into the night, the city wrapped around her like something earned. She wasn't haunted by ghosts anymore. She was followed by her own shadow, long, sure, and grounded. And for the first time in years, she realized she had not just survived the storm. She had become the architect of the shelter. The ballroom was buzzing. Not with noise, but with nervous energy, the kind that always precedes something sacred. The red TEDx circle gleamed softly beneath the lights, perfectly centered on the stage, like a heartbeat waiting to be spoken into. Backstage, Teresa sat quietly with a notebook in her lap. She wasn't wearing anything dramatic. A slate gray blouse, navy pants, small earrings she'd bought from a young artist at one of her own mentoring events. No labels, no armor, just her. And on the page before her, the final sentence of a speech that had taken her years, lifetimes really, to write. She had been invited to speak months ago. At first, she said no. I'm not a thought leader, she'd told the organizer. I'm just someone who learned to survive. But they had insisted. Not because she had survived, but because she had transformed. You didn't build a brand, the woman had said. You built a blueprint. Now the lights dimmed. The host's voice echoed gently across the room. Our next speaker is a businesswoman, a mentor, and a survivor, not of tragedy but of expectation. Please welcome Teresa Hale. The applause was soft, almost reverent. Teresa walked slowly to the center of the circle, her notebook still in hand. She didn't need a teleprompter, the story lived in her bones. I used to think success looked like applause, she began. Or headlines. Or finally being seen by the people who once dismissed you. A few nods from the audience. But then I realized something. Success isn't revenge. It's resurrection. She let the silence settle for a beat. I didn't get here by proving anyone wrong. I got here by proving myself right. She told her story, not the one the newspapers had printed, but the one between the lines. The closet floor. The ledger entries at 2 a.m. The quiet click of her boutique doors each morning, even when her hands shook. I didn't want to be a symbol, she said. I wanted to be free. Halfway through the speech, she paused. She looked out at the crowd, not at their faces but their postures. There was a woman in the front row, hand clenched around her pen. A teenager in the second, eyes wide and wet. An older woman off to the side holding a handbag from Teresa's first boutique. None of them needed saving. They just needed space. And someone who told them they didn't need permission. So many times Teresa said, people ask me, how did you forgive him? And I say I didn't do it for him. I did it to set myself free from the weight of what he couldn't carry. Her final words landed like a whisper and a drumbeat all at once. Women don't need to be rescued. They need to be believed when they say they are strong enough to rescue themselves. The room stood before the applause came. And then it did, roaring, rising, reverent. Not for perfection, but for proof. Backstage, she sat down again, her hands finally still. She opened the notebook one more time. Inside the front cover was a quote she had written down years ago, back when things were falling apart. Success is the best revenge. She had lived by it. Until now. She picked up a pen, crossed out the word revenge. And above it in steady ink she wrote rebirth. Later that evening, Teresa walked out into the cool air of downtown Boston. She took the long way back to her hotel, cutting through the park where the trees whispered in their spring bloom. Her heels echoed softly against the cobblestone. She passed a girl sitting on a bench hunched over a laptop. Strands of hair tucked behind one ear, headphones in. The girl looked up just for a second and recognized her. A tiny smile passed between them. Not fan to speaker, but woman to woman. Back in her hotel room, Teresa slipped off her shoes and stood by the window looking out at the glow of the city. She wasn't tired, she was full. There would be more stories after this. Not all her own. Some passed down, some discovered. Some whispered by women who were still in the middle of their storms, trying to decide whether to burn it all down or build something new from the ashes. And when they were ready to rise, she would be there. Not to lead, but to light a match. In her journal, she wrote only one sentence that night. This was never the end. It was always the beginning.